Greetings, welcome to the first part of a training series on Adobe Bridge, and we're going to get started right away. Adobe Bridge is bundled with Adobe Photoshop, and it's one of the tools that I use literally every day when I'm editing pictures. And so, taking you into Adobe Bridge, want to kind of get acquainted with the architecture of it, kind of how it looks, what it looks like. Starting with the top, we're going to start right in the nitty-gritty here. We've got a kind of a web browser type of deal to where if you're going from one folder to another, you can go back to that or go forward to that. They've got a recent history folder, and then also return to the last application that you've used. You can easily import pictures from your camera, refine, and then also outputting to web or PDF. I don't use that a whole lot in my workflow. And let's talk about workflow spaces. Here we've got the area to where you would want to switch what kind of workspace you're working with. And so I always go out of the essentials, but there's a film strip to where I can have my content down here and my preview up here. This gives you more of a feel like in probably Lightroom, which I'm not a super fan of. I respect it a lot, but I just don't work out of that a lot. Here's a metadata view, which I do not use at all. Output view. Oops. Wait for that. Here's an output view. This would definitely be helpful if you do a lot of print, publication type of work, especially in PDF. Keywords. And so here we've got everything with keywords, and we'll get into that in a bit. I've just started using that a little bit more. A preview, which is very similar to the workflow that I use, and then light table and folders. I'm going to go back to the essentials. And for some people, on occasion, it probably might look like this, and to where you see a lot of what you have kind of centralized in here in the content area. And the content area is fine, but what I like to work out of is the is working with the preview button. So when opening Bridge for the first time, don't be afraid to use your manipulation tools to size the windows as you see fit. For me, this works very, very well. And as we work from left to right here, we've got a favorites folder, or a favorites tab and a folders tab. And what I generally like to do is a folders structure. On the Macintosh side, we've got the desktop. We also have the computer. And if you're working off the computer, for people who aren't Mac users or kind of new to the Mac, here's your users folder within the computer. You click on that, and that's in your Macintosh hard drive. And then once you find that person that you're working with, now it's going to be difficult. I can't work off of other people's stuff typically. I can't see their stuff as easily. So I stick to my own, which I only have one user on this computer, which is me. If I go into, let's say, pictures, here it's got a nice breadcrumb hierarchy to where you can see the nested view of where everything is at in your photos. And so here we go. So let's pick a folder, and let's find 1030, 1013. Let's see. There we go. Here's some JPEGs. These are straight off the back of my camera. This is imported from my phone. Let's actually go to stuff that I've renamed. So let's say like this folder here. Once again, more nested folders. The thing that it pulls up right away is my content within this folder. And when I'm first working, we'll get into importing files into a later date. But I just, for stuff that you already have in here, and you might have to jump to that next tutorial on how to import photos. But that'll be in lesson 2. But for this lesson, what I like is that it's got a nice view of all my pictures here. I can narrow it down to 1. I could, get more in here, but for me that just gets kind of mangled. So I just like going in a single kind of row, typically. And from here you can see that I've got these stars labeled on here. And so with that, I'm going to jump down to the bottom lower left and show you that I've got filter, collections, and to export my files. I don't have any presets yet. I don't have any collections yet, but I do have filters. And so when I go through images, and once again we'll go through this in a later date, if I hit the space bar on my screen, I get a full screen view. And when I go to rate my photos, and everyone's kind of different, it's either a 1 or a 5 for me. It's either a keeper or it's not a keeper. And so very quickly I'll do 1, and you can see that jumps up down to the lower left. I hit the arrow key down. Now I know in like Lightroom it will automatically advance for you. That's great. I guess there's one more button to push. After I've rated this. There's some classic photos right there. Let's say I do get one and I want it rated a 5. I just hit the 5 and boom. Now, if you get into like the 6, 7, 8, 9, you get into different like approvals, rejects, and all that. And so, if I go back to 0 and then hit the 9 again, it turns that off. So I'm going to go back to rate this a 1 star. Hit the space bar to get back into my normal view. And from there, I've rated everything. I can go and look at all my 1-star photos. I can look at my 2-star photos. And so here's one that's kind of iffy. I didn't really want to work with this too much because I've got too much shadowing, and I know I could probably fix it in Photoshop, but I don't want to. So what I typically do when I'm finished is like I'll take all my 5-star ones and I'll drag them in and organize them as I see fit. The nice thing about this program is that very organizational. It's got the file types that I need. If I want to look up keywords, I can look those up. Date created, date modified, the orientation, which is great. Aspect ratio. If I've got 8 5x7s, I can look at that and I can see that I've already cropped these to a 5x7. Color profiles, not a big deal. ISO speed ratings might be, if I want to see everything that I've shot at a ISO 1000. I can take a look at that, and I can create a special workflow to get rid of the noise that's created in all of these files. ISO 5000, wow, look at that. Crazy. I want to see what was taken at ISO 5000. Let's see, I have to turn off that. So if you can't see something, it's because it's got too many filters applied to it. So you have to start taking that out. So these shots were taken at ISO 5000. Wow, that's incredible. I'm not going to lie to you. Moving on down the line, here I've got exposure time. 1/60th of a second. If I want to see something and take care of like a blur part of a workflow, I can do that from within there. Aperture value. If I want to look at, what had the widest open aperture, what had the tightest open aperture. Now I know that these are my ring shots because I shoot them at a tight aperture. Focal length. I can separate out by focal length to see what I shot the most of. It looks like I shot out at 70 millimeters. I wanted that compression of the lens. Very nice. I did shoot a few with my prime 85 millimeter. No lens. This could be because there's 6 there. It could be my folders that I've got in there. Tells you which lenses I used during that day, during this shoot. So I use my 24-70, my 35 millimeter, 60 millimeter, and which is my macro, and my 85 millimeter. My D600, once again 6, those are the folders in there. Serial number, that's the serial number of the camera, and just in case you have two D600s or two of the same camera. Camera raw settings, and copyright notice. If I have everything I've got, it's got a copyright notice on it embedded from the camera, so very nice. Now, looking at this, let's move over to the right-hand side. Let's pick a ISO 5000 picture. All right, and if I see, there's some killer shots there. We'll go back to this one. There we go. Just some simple interaction. Down below here, I've got metadata, and if I scroll up, bring this window up, here I can see a lot of from what the camera gave me, and so size, dimensions, what color space it's working out of, and then down below it tells me even more. And I'm going to use the slider here. If I wanted to edit any one of these, it'd be very easy to. This was in the big town of Hudson, South Dakota, in the great state of South Dakota. ISO country code. I don't even know what that is all about, but hey, you know what? Job identifier. You can put a lot of meta tags in here, and it's great because some people do that. They have like a whole workflow. Nice thing is if I do this to one, I can copy all of this metadata and paste it to all the rest of my images. And so, very easy to do. Yeah, it's got all sorts of, especially with my camera EXIF data, tells me a lot about what I'm using here. And so, I didn't even use the flash on this. That is insane. Not gonna lie to you. So, GPS, in case you're not that loves the locational data, that's great. If this is a movie product or project, you could, if you had music in there, you could put music information in there. And then also, look, I've got video information. For the medical field, I can put all sorts of stuff for like chart data if I was doing medical stuff, if I was shooting medical types of photos. So very, very nice to have. Down at the bottom, I'm going to click back in here. I'm not going to apply these. Down at the bottom, I'm going to show you what the slider is all about. And here I can make my thumbnails larger. I can also click to lock the thumbnail grid and then view content as thumbnails, and that's typically what I like to do. Or view the content as a list. I do not care for that. Details won't be too bad because it would give you some like informational type of sorting. But once again, I don't get into that too much. Let's see. Create metadata template. Now, moving up to this, we've got preferences that you can get into and look at everything that you can include in here. If I don't want to include this stuff in my metadata, I can get rid of it. And so, very nice to have. Same thing, anything that you can look at for preferences would be covered in this section, which subsequently would be covered up in here in preferences. It's the same thing. So, looking at editing creating a metadata template, this is something that if I was to import stuff from my camera every single time, I would include this stuff in here. And so I don't get too crazy on this. You could if you wanted to, but for the most part, it's something that I don't waste a lot of my time on. I'm not saying that it's not valuable, but it's just something I don't use. So just about finished with the introduction to this. Some of the things that you can include in your windows is if you don't want to use a lot of this, you can get rid of like the path bar. So if you don't use that a whole lot, which I really don't because I just navigate from here, it gives you a little more screen real estate to work with. I don't need the export panel, and so I get rid of it out of there. Filter panel, I do need that. Keywords, we haven't talked about keywords yet. We will. Favorites, I don't use the favorites at all, so I'm going to get rid of that. Not that it's a big deal that I had it there. If you want it back, you just re-click on it. And so let's look at the keywords. It's got some by default: birthday, graduation, wedding. I can always tag these for wedding. Keywords are getting more popular in searching, as it will also tag your photos. If you put your photos online, it becomes easier to find that through the metadata that you can tag with these keywords. Also, it's easy to find within your computer, especially if you're working on a Mac. It's very nice and friendly on like 10.8 and 10.9 that you can find files by keyword. And a lot of the new file structure that Macs save in allows you to tag files with keywords. And so if I wanted to create my own, I just go down to the bottom here and create a keyword of, let's say, candid. And this is more for, like, let's say I wanted to create a folder or a portfolio, if you will, of just candid photos that a client wants to see. Well, I can easily create a new keyword and tag it as candid. Oops, I gotta check there. It's checked now. And so candid wedding. So if I filter out my keywords for candid wedding, it's going to be easily findable throughout the whole deal. So if I start way at the top of my computer, and let's say I have thousands of files in different folders, and I look for wedding candid, of course it doesn't find anything for me. Spotlight search, bridge search. You know what I should do? Instead of doing it that way, I need to go into my filter. And if I was to look for keywords, and I believe that was in here. There we go. I'm looking for keywords. Here I can search for candid and wedding. And when you get into, there we go. When you get into a larger file structure, you should be able to, let's see, click on pictures, keywords. And it's everything within that file folder. So I guess not as robust as I was hoping for. It might be able to be a little bit better once I've tagged that, if I could search in my Spotlight. I doubt that it can, but it does make it a little bit quicker for finding files if it was in a large conglomerate of pictures. So anyway, let's see. That kind of concludes the introduction to Adobe Bridge. Just kind of showed you where everything's at within this construct. The next session will be on, part 2 will be on how to import pictures and how to kind of work with the importing process, culling images, and then also converting them to a workable format if you don't have the right codec, not codec, but the plugin to see your raw files. As with Adobe Bridge, I've got a newer camera to where this version of Bridge does not support the raw file that I use anymore, so I have to convert it to what's called an Adobe DNG. And we'll cover all that in part 2. So thank you very much for watching. If you like this, please subscribe to my YouTube channel at Nitram Photo, and that's Nitram Photo, all one word. Thank you much, and we'll see you the next time.